هودي مسيحيين تنك.
بدنا هالقانون، بدنا القانون، بدنا القانون.
بالاخر التنك بتكبيه.
الكويت عم تتعرض لحرب كثير كبيره، اساسا حرب بالشام بالضاحيه الجنوبيه، عون وجماعته.
Good afternoon. It is Saturday, May 25th. I'm Yumna Nofal, and these are today's headlines. Sniper fire kills at least 4 people in Tripoli after another night of clashes between supporters and opponents of President Assad. Shmail lashes out at officials for not assuming their national responsibilities to protect the citizens of Tripoli. And forces loyal to Syrian President Assad unleashed their heaviest artillery yet in a week-long battle to dislodge rebels from Qusayr. Sniper fire kills at least 4 people in Tripoli after another night of clashes between supporters and opponents of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad in the northern Lebanese city. 3 of the deaths, Bassem Asad, Ad-Danawi, Hussam al-Hantour and Hassan al-Bani, all hailed from Bab al-Tabane, security sources said, adding that the resident of Jabal Muhsin, Nader Sulaiman, was also killed in the days of fighting. Saturday's fatalities raised the death toll from the renewed fighting that erupted on Sunday to 28. Almost 250 have also been wounded in the daily clashes that have rocked the port city. On Friday, local militiamen from Bab al-Tabane rejected Lebanese army deployment in their neighborhood or a ceasefire to end the violence until the head of their rivals in Jabal Muhsin, Arab Democratic Party chief Rifat Eid, is handed over to authorities. Kataib MP Sami Jmail hit sharply at Free Patriotic Movement leader Michel Aoun for agreeing to submit his candidacy under the 1960 law, saying it is a mistake that will keep the status quo in Lebanon for the next 4 years. He then lashed out at the president, the caretaker prime minister, and the defense minister for not assuming their national responsibilities to protect the citizens in Tripoli. He said elections cannot take place while people are dying and the violence is ongoing in Lebanon's second capital. And he also added that the country is on the brink of civil war. Hezbollah leader Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah is expected to make a televised speech at 5:30 local time this afternoon on the occasion of Liberation Day, at a time when his party's involvement in the Syrian war is drawing large-scale local and international condemnation. Political sources expect Nasrallah to snap back at the parties that have expressed frustration at Hezbollah's support for the Syrian army against the rebels, mainly in Al-Qusayr. Hezbollah's deputy chief, Sheikh Naim Qasim, said on Friday that the European Union would be making a huge mistake to label the group terrorists. France this week joined an EU push to declare Hezbollah's military wing a terrorist organization, and the move could prove pivotal after Germany joined a British effort to make the move. The U.S. has long pressured Europe to add Hezbollah to its terrorist list, which would hamper its operations in Europe. Caretaker Prime Minister Najib Miati says the anniversary of Liberation Day should provide an opportunity to strengthen unity in the country. He said the anniversary of Liberation Day should be an incentive for all to further boost national unity because it is the sole means of strengthening the authority of a strong state that embraces everyone and can thwart conspiracies targeting the security and stability. Miati, who hailed those who fought and died to end the occupation of the South, said Liberation Day represented a noble national day in Lebanon's modern history, which showed the world that a people that holds onto its rights and resists for their sake is people that deserve life and dignity. Forces loyal to Syrian President Bashar al-Assad unleashed their heaviest artillery and rocket barrage yet in a week-long battle to dislodge rebels from a strategic western town. Activists are saying that pro-Assad troops, including fighters from Hezbollah, have been trying to push rebels out of Qusayr. They have gained ground, but rebels have clung to some positions. Saturday's barrage of rockets and tank shells began after daybreak. And activist Hadi Abdullah and the pro-opposition Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, which is based in Britain, both said it was the most intense shelling since the regime launched its offensive a week ago. The fighting over Qusayr has highlighted Hezbollah's growing role in Syria's war. The group initially tried to play down its involvement, but could no longer do so after several dozen of its fighters were killed and buried in large funerals in Lebanon. Syria's fractious opposition scrambled to agree a new leadership in a bid to present a coherent front at peace talks with the United States and Russia, which are convening to seek an end to more than 2 years of civil war. Washington and Moscow have been compelled to revive diplomacy by developments in recent months, which include new reports of atrocities, accusations that chemical weapons are being used, and the rise of an al-Qaeda-linked fighters among rebels.
We have not received a formal invitation. The different representatives that are coming from different countries, they're clarifying their country's position, which is something very typical. We've met with different countries in the last couple of weeks. We met with Saudi Arabia, we met with Qatar, we met with Turkey. We've met with Ambassador Ford. I believe Mr. Eric Chevalier from France is here as well. I think the question is a lot more is beyond whether we agree to sit down with 5 names. I can tell you that any negotiations for the sake of negotiations is just an exercise and wasting time, and we don't want to do that. We want to stop the bloodshed. So it's very important for us to have goodwill gestures from both sides. We want to make sure that when we enter those negotiations that the bloodshed in Syria will stop.
Business, economic, and political leaders from the Middle East and North Africa have gathered at a resort on the Dead Sea in Jordan for the first day of the World Economic Forum. World leaders, including King Abdullah of Jordan and the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, will be joined by over 900 of the region's top business leaders and policymakers. During the opening session, King Abdullah called for an immediate end to the violence in Syria and for a solution to the Palestinian-Israeli conflict.
In Syria, a political solution is urgently needed to stop that country's dangerous fragmentation and to resolve the dire refugee crisis. Our Jordanian population is now hosting 10% of its size in Syrian refugees, and this may double by year end. Jordanians are generously sharing scarce water and other resources. For host countries like us in Lebanon, for displaced and vulnerable Syrians, both inside and outside their country, increased humanitarian assistance from the global community is vital. But what ultimately is needed is an immediate end to the violence, so all the Syrian people can rebuild their country. We must also work together to address the core crisis in our region, the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. Extremism everywhere has grown fat off this crisis.
Coming up next, the Organization of African Unity celebrates its 50th anniversary, and we've got the speeches and the stories. Stay with us. Welcome back. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry is accusing Sudanese President Omar al-Bashir of repressing the people of the South Kordofan and Blue Nile regions and trying to impose Islamic rule on them. In both regions, he said, you have people who for a long time have felt that they want their secular governance and identity respected. He told reporters on the sidelines of an African Union summit that he insisted that people in the war-torn areas where rebels are battling government troops did not want independence or to break away from Sudan. South Sudan separated from Sudan in 2011 after decades of bloody civil war, but still unsettled issues over border areas and oil have continued to flare into clashes. Kerry announced after talks with Ethiopian Prime Minister Haile Mariam Desalegn that he would soon appoint a new U.S. envoy to Sudan and South Sudan to replace Princeton Lehman. And 50 years ago, the Organization of African Unity was founded to work towards the unification of Africa. The organization later developed into the African Union, or simply AU. Leaders from Africa and around the world arrived in the Ethiopian capital, Addis Ababa, where the AU has its headquarters, to celebrate the 50th anniversary. Latin America's leading economy has launched a drive to expand its economic ties with Africa, a sign of how crises in the rich world are pushing faster-growing emerging economies to trade and invest among themselves. The BRICS countries, comprising of Brazil, China, India, and Russia, are now Africa's largest trading partners and its biggest new group of investors. BRICS, as they are known, Africa trade, is seen eclipsing $500 billion by 2015, according to Standard Bank.
The African Renaissance cannot be realized without bringing about a paradigm shift in our political and socio-economic governance. We all recognize by now that the policy orthodoxy imposed on us from outside to simply get the price right did not help us to break the vicious cycle of poverty and achieve sustainable economic growth. Therefore, we have to do more than getting the prices right and play a proactive role in pushing forward our transformation agenda, taking due cognizance of the nature of our respective political, economic, and development potentials.
Leaders of a mosque in the southeast London area where a soldier was butchered by two men have used prayers to condemn the killing and to distance their Muslim community from the act, which has shocked Britain. Imam Swaleh at the Greenwich Islamic Center, Woolwich Mosque, told reporters that his mosque and his faithful are repulsed by the attack. There are fears locally that the murder could inflame racial and religious tensions. Mosque religious leaders and elders were keen to stress that they did not know the two men and that they had not been noticed attending the Woolwich Mosque. The murder just a month after the Boston Marathon bombing and the first Islamist killing in Britain since local suicide bombers killed 52 people in London in 2005 revived fears of lone wolves who may have had no direct contact with Al-Qaeda. IMF Chief Christine Lagarde emerged from more than 20 hours of questioning by judicial officials over 2 days, smiling and proclaiming her innocence in an investigation into the role she played in settling a dispute between the French government and a businessman while she was finance minister in Paris. French magistrates had decided not to place Lagarde under formal investigation over her role in a $368.5 million arbitration payment made to a supporter of former President Nicolas Sarkozy.
I have just been heard by the investigating magistrates of the Court of Justice in a very complex and long-standing case that has opposed the liquidators of Bernard Tapie Group to Crédit Lyonnais. Through this process, I was able to provide information to demonstrate that I have always acted in the best interest of the state and in accordance with the law. My status of assisted witness confirms this. Now it's time for me to return to Washington to pursue my mission as Managing Director of the IMF and to report to my board.
Now for news around the world in brief. 16 Pakistani children and a teacher were charred to death when a van carrying them to a private school in Gujarat, about 112 kilometers north of Lahore, caught fire. Police said fire erupted in the van carrying 24 children between the ages of 5 and 12, just a few kilometers from the school. The police officials told reporters the blaze was apparently caused by a spark when the driver of the dual-fuel van switched from natural gas to petrol. A nearly week-long spate of rioting in Sweden spread outside the capital, Stockholm. In Örebro, a town in central Sweden, 25 masked youth set fire to 3 cars and a school and tried to torch a police station. The rioting was set off earlier this month by the police shooting of a 69-year-old man. The spree of destruction has seen masked youth vandalize schools, libraries, and police stations, setting cars alight and hurling stones at police and firefighters. And President Barack Obama urges the future leaders of the U.S. military to stamp out sexual assault from their ranks, warning that a few individuals could undermine the strongest military in the world. Addressing the graduating class of the U.S. Naval Academy, Obama used his commencement speech to take on a problem that has dogged the Pentagon and the White House in recent weeks. A study released by the Defense Department 2 weeks ago estimated that reports of unwanted sexual contact in the military, from groping to rape, rose 37% in 2012 to about 26,000 cases from 19,000 the previous year. And on that note, we end our bulletin for today. Let me remind you of the weekend headlines. Sniper fire kills at least 4 people in Tripoli after another night of clashes between supporters and opponents of President Assad. Jumayel lashes out at officials for not assuming their national responsibilities to protect the citizens of Tripoli. And forces loyal to Syrian President Assad unleashed their heaviest artillery yet in a week-long battle to dislodge rebels from the town of Qusaid. Those are your Saturday headlines live on Future Television in Beirut. I'm Yumna Naufal, wishing you a good weekend.
هودي مسيحيين تنك
بدنا هالقانون، بدنا القانون، بدنا القانون.
بالاخر تنك بتكبيك.
الكويت عم تتعرض لحرب كتير كبيرة، بأساسها حرب بالشام بالضاحية الجنوبية. عون بجماعته